Hello everyone and welcome to yet another episode of the Behind the Frame series, and I'm very excited to be back on here sharing a really cool image with you, a leopard that I photographed while in the Masai Mara recently. Now for those of you who don't know about the Behind the Frame series, myself and the rest of the Wild Eye guides jump on here and we choose some of our favorite images and we run you through our editing process, whether it's on majority on Lightroom, but also one or two other tricks here and there in other softwares. So today I'm going to keep it to Lightroom. I'm going to share some cool tips and tricks with you, and hopefully you guys will take something away from that. So with that being said, let's get stuck right in. So as I mentioned to you, today's image that I'm going to be sharing with you is a really cool image of a leopard that I just really like, and I'm going to jump straight into that, share that with you, and this is it. This is what we are going to be working with today. This was a really cool scene. One morning we found a female leopard with her sub-adult cub, and they were just cruising around the entire morning, and it was so cool. We managed to follow them, get them in that beautiful golden light, but probably my favorite moment of that entire sighting was this, when the female managed to get up into a tree, and shortly after that, the young sub-adult came and followed her. And he stopped at one point, literally, I mean, it doesn't get more perfect as this, with the light coming straight through the trees and falling right onto his face over here while he looked up at his mother. So absolutely loved it. You can imagine we shot the lights out of the scene, but very, very cool. So like I said, I'm going to share some tips and tricks, run you through my editing process. So firstly, where I'm going to start off today is you'll notice I've got 3 images down at the bottom here. Like I mentioned, we literally did shoot the lights out of this, but 3 very similar images that are all sort of taken in within a few seconds. And you guys might have had this before, where you're looking at your images and there's 4, 5, 6 of them that are very similar and you're not exactly sure which one to choose. So I'm going to show you a great little tool in Lightroom that allows us to pick between those. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go and select all of these. In fact, first we're going to go into library mode, back up here. We're going to click on all 3 of these images, just make sure that they're all selected, and then this little cool sort of symbol down here, survey view, we're going to click on that, and that then brings all of these images up nice and big for us. Now we can look at them alongside each other. Now when I look at this, first thing I'm thinking is sorry, let me just go back to that. When I look at this guy, this, for me, certainly isn't the best one of the 3. So straight off the bat, I'm going to go and remove that. You go down here, click on that little X, brings it out nice and big. And now you're just choosing between these 2. Now, when I look at these 2, I like the fact that in this image, we've got both the leopard's eyes. And this one, we've only got one. However, the way the light is falling, the way the leopard is looking directly into the light in this image is what does it for me. So for that reason, I'm going to end up editing this one here. So lastly, I go get rid of that guy. And then what it does is it just brings you to the image that you have now chosen. So with that being said, let's click D for develop, and we're going to go into the develop. Now, for those of you who might have seen some of my behind the frames before, I like to work through a sort of process, a workflow of crop, global, local. I use that for pretty much every single one of my images, and that really helps me build a good foundation to then make every image unique once I get to the local adjustments. So what I mean by that is crop. Obviously that's pretty simple. We're going to crop this, get rid of all the stuff that we're not going to be working on, not going to be editing. It's not going to affect our final image. The second thing I do is I like to go into my global adjustments. That's when I'll make adjustments that are specific to the entire image. So when I add, for example, let's say exposure, it will add exposure to the entire image. Lastly, my local adjustments, that allows me to be a little bit more specific. I get in nice and tight. I add masks where I want to, and that just allows me to manipulate the final touches to make sure that my subject is absolutely popping in my image. So let's get stuck into it. The first thing I'm just quickly going to run you guys through here is a few of my settings. As you can see, I was shooting in aperture priority, so I controlled my ISO and my aperture. As you can see, we had some really good light. It was mid-morning, sun coming through there nicely, so ISO could be nice and low. I had my aperture nice and low as well, living on the edge, 2.8, try to get it as smack bang on that eye as I could. And lastly, because of the dark scene here, I was definitely underexposing. Remember, in aperture priority, that you set your ISO, set your aperture, the camera will then spit out shutter speed for you. I then went against what the camera would have tried to do. Because it's so dark, the camera would have tried to brighten this up, and I went against that. I underexposed, and that's what gave me such a fast shutter speed. So that's it. We're going to get rid of that, and now let's get stuck into our crop, global, local. So first thing we're going to come and do is here, going to tap on my crop. Now looking at this image, I love the flow of the energy. You can see eyes are always a good indication of the flow of energy, where your negative space should be in an image. In this case, this leopard's looking perfectly up into this corner, directly towards the sunlight. So all of this is completely wasted space. So let's bring this in nicely. I'm just going to go in on a crop ratio of 2 to 3, 4 by 6. And something around about there. He falls perfectly on one of our PowerPoints there. Smack it. Boom, bada bing. Happy days. What I might do is just bring it up. Bring it in a little bit there. To something like that. Oh, love it. Nice and simple. Step number 1. Happy days. Finished. Step number 2. Like I mentioned. This is now when we go into our global adjustments. This is where we want to make touches that will affect the entire image. Alright. The first place I'm going to go here is I want to try and really darken these darks and make sure that he's popping nicely. So first place, going to go to my exposure, bring that down nicely. Have a look at what that does. Oh, glory. Love it. Absolutely love it. I'm going to go touch my blacks. Whenever I'm working on these here, I like to then go from the bottom up. So I'll start with my blacks. It will stretch out our histogram a little bit for us. There's not a lot of whites and highlights for us to work with here, but nevertheless, like to just punch in some contrast over there. Literally, we've touched 5 sliders, guys, and have a look here. If I hold in my before and after with my backslash key, have a look what we're doing. We're really just darkening the darks, brightening the brights. What I might do is I feel like I've pushed the exposure a tad too much. I'm just going to bring that back a little bit to around about there. And now that's what we're working with. Okay, so very simple. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and pump in some clarity. I absolutely love clarity. It just adds some contrast to our edges and really just gets those things popping over there. So literally just a tickle of that. We don't want to do too much. Texture might be quite nice here. We've got the good bark. And I'm still thinking I've pushed this exposure just too much. So I'm going to bring that back a little bit to around about there. All right. Clarity, we're going to bring that back down to even less. Minus or +2 and bring that texture down a bit. This is what we're doing now. You can see we're starting to get some nice punchy contrast in here and starting to really bring this image to life. I love the greens that we have over here. I love the blues that we've got, some good oranges and yellows. So I'm going to go tickle the vibrance ever so slightly. Not too much. Vibrance can run away from you very quickly, as you can see, just based on my personal opinion, my personal touch. So in that case, just going to bring it enough just to bring some good color and life into this image. Alrighty, so that's some nice touches there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head down to my tone curve to add some contrast. Now, the reason I don't add contrast here is because if we add it amongst this general slider here, it's going to throw contrast across the entire image. What the tone curve allows us to do is it allows us to have a bit more control, be more specific, and add contrast into specific tones. And this is what I mean. So for example, contrast, that throws it across the entire image, as you can see. Not much control there. Instead, if we come into our tone curve, we can go into our darks specifically and only work on our darks. The same goes for whatever it may be, lights. See, affecting just the light areas. So in that case, just for those of you who might not know, if you ever push a slider somewhere and you want to bring it back to the middle, just double click on that slider and it will take it back to 0. So nice little trick there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into my shadows over here and I'm going to darken that a bit and I'm going to brighten up these lights ever so slightly. And literally just a tickle like that. You can see here we've barely touched those. Keep your eye on the image. Very, very subtle adjustment, but it is changing quite nicely there. So that's a little bit of contrast in there that we've thrown in. The next place I'm going to go down to is my detail. I'm going to move this just over to this leopard's eye because that is the focus point here. I'm going to grab my masking tool. What masking does now is this defines the edges to Lightroom. All right, so this is what I mean. If I hold in my option key and I pull on this masking tab, everything that is in white is where the application of sharpness is going to be applied. So literally in this case, it's the entire image. Now, if I pull this along, have a look now how we all of a sudden just start to define the edges here rather. So if I carry on pulling that up, keep your eye over here as well on the eye. You'll see we're starting to define that nicely over there. We're not too worried about the background in terms of the leaves and stuff like that. You know, of course, these are in the same depth of field line as the leopard, so they will be sharp. But if we can pull that all the way nice and all the way to the top there, that it's just our leopard mainly being sharpened, that's what we want. So I'm going to leave it around about there. Now I can go and apply my sharpening. Bring up my sharpening, I can bring up my radius just a touch, and my detail as well just a touch. There we go, and that's it, guys. That's literally all we've done on the global adjustments. If we flick before our before and after, by holding in my backslash key, you can see what we're starting to do here. We're really darkening those darks. We're using this beautiful light falling on this leopard. Happy days. Another great way to see your before and after, if you come and click on this little Y thing here, you can also press Y on your keyboard, and that puts them, your before and your after, right next to each other. So this is always just a great way to keep track of what you're doing, how you're going about your image. And I really like I mentioned, how we're starting to darken these areas quite a bit and focus on our leopard. We're going to work on this even more now. So step 1 finished with cropping. Step 2 finished with our global adjustments. The next thing we're going to start doing now is our local adjustments. And this is my favorite part, because this is where every image is different. You're going to handle every image differently depending what you're trying to achieve. So whenever you get to this point, it's always good to keep things in mind like sharpness, brightness, contrast, texture, all of those things that are usually, that's what draws your viewer's eye to your subject. Okay, that's what holds weight in an image. Now, if you can focus that onto your subject, it's easy. You're winning all day long. So we're going to keep that in mind when we are adding some local adjustments here. Now, the first thing we're going to do, you come up here to this little circle looking thing here, click on that. That brings us into our local adjustments, okay, or masks. The first thing I want to do is, when I look at this image now, first thing, I'm already thinking leopard is a little bit too bright here, so I want to focus on that. Just bring that down a touch, make sure that it's not popping. I love the fact that it is the brightest point on the image, and just want to make sure that it's not overexposed there. We are fighting with a little bit of contrast in the background here, so we want to make sure that we've got good contrast on our leopard, possibly against this dark area here, maybe darken those areas a bit. And finally, just focus on this light that's coming in beautifully on our leopard here. So let's start off by clicking our subject first. We want to just work on those whites. Okay, Lightroom's done a decent job there. So just going to go to our highlights over here. And let's see, I'm going to do it for extreme case. This is what we're wanting to do, okay? So like I mentioned, we just want to darken those areas a bit, not too much. And in fact, I actually don't think it's necessary to do it on the whole leopard, because I quite like the highlights we've got on the leopard's face. So I'm going to delete that one, and I'm going to come in with a brush here. I'm going to add a brush. I'm just going to bring my flow and density down a little bit, which basically determines per stroke, that's how much. So for example, if my flow and density is sitting at 60%, then only 60% of an edit is going to be applied. If it's all the way at 100, it's going to be 100%, if that makes sense. So literally bring it down to 60 or so. I'm just going to go and brush on this area here, because we just want to bring those highlights specifically down there. Let's bring those highlights down. There we go. You see now how it's not as bright. If I go switch this on and off, just keep your eye on the leopard over there. See there how it's not as bright, still bright enough though, which is quite nice. I like it. It's a good bright area on the image, pulling your viewer's eyes. That's what we want. All right, so there we go. Nice little touch up there. The next thing I want to do is I want to just remember the focus. The main point is this leopard's face. So I'm going to go and brush in on his face a little bit there, just so that we can bring up some sharpness over there, some texture and clarity. And once again, just make sure that that's the area that everyone's looking at. Starting off with brightness, bringing up my exposure a little bit. Next thing I'm going to go is I'm going to add some contrast in those edges with a little bit of clarity. And lastly, just bringing up some sharpness. There we go. Keep your eye on there. See, very subtle adjustment, but a nice little touch up. Once again, got to go in nice and tight on the leopard's face. I just want to work. See this beautiful catch light. Catch light is just a dream. Absolutely love it. So I'm going to just go over this leopard's eye over here. See if we can manipulate that a bit. I'm going to bring those blacks down. I'm going to bring my whites up, get some contrast in there. And one little sneaky thing I might do is I might just bring the temperature down on this leopard's eye a little bit, to around about there. Something like that. Exposure up as well a touch. Next thing, contrast, sharpness, happy days. There we go. So once again, keep your eyes on that eye. See what we've done there. We've brightened it a little bit. We've punched in that catch light a bit. And we've also just made it slightly cooler in terms of temperature. Now if we zoom out, there we go. This is what we're working with now. Before and after once again. There we go. So I'm quite happy with what we've done to our leopard now. We've added in some extra oomph there, just to make sure that that really is the focus. Now we want to work on these edges around here. So what I'm going to do for that, I'm going to come and create another mask. I'm going to make a nice radial gradient. And I'm going to draw a nice big one here. And I'm going to draw this, or put this rather, on our leopard over here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just shift it a little bit, so just to keep the oval shape really in terms of basically what I'm trying to say here. Okay, let's do this first. Once I've created that mask, okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and invert this. Bearing in mind that everything that is red, that's where your adjustment is being applied. So in this case, we can see nicely that the leopard isn't necessarily being touched by this adjustment. So basically what that means is if we were to come in here and for extreme case, pull exposure all the way down, this is essentially what we're doing. We're darkening everything around this leopard, keeping this beautiful light falling on the leopard, okay? Now, what we are going to do though, is I'm going to bring that exposure back. Because of this beautiful light that's falling on this leopard, okay, we are going to work with that. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to now say subtract, and I'm going to go with a brush. And I'm just going to bump this up a little bit. So basically now I want to just remove some of this in terms of where the light is going to be coming through onto this leopard. So literally just something like that, falling onto that specific area. Now that adjustment won't be happening as sort of harshly, if I can say it that way, on the leopard over here. So once again, for extreme case, if I go pull this exposure all the way down, this is what we're working with now. So we've still got this beautiful light falling through here, and I absolutely love that. So I'm going to bring this back a bit to around about there. Now if I go turn this on and off, keep your eye on the image, have a look what we've done. We've really just darkened all of these dark areas or bright areas that were sort of competing with our leopard at one point. Whereas now we can confidently say that our leopard is the brightest patch on this image, which, like I mentioned to you, brightness, sharpness, contrast, those are the types of things that's going to draw your viewer's eyes. So in doing this, we've now been able to manipulate that quite nicely. So I'm quite happy with that for now. And literally, maybe one more touch that we could go do here is if we make sure we're on this mask, if we go and we bring our texture down, that's also just going to soften everything, ensuring that our leopard is the sharpest, the brightest, and potentially the most contrasty. Those in the background there are something we're going to have to compete with. In general, what we could go and do there, possibly, let's say if we take another mask, we just go and brush over some of these areas here very roughly, something like that. This one over here, boom, click over there, just throwing a little bit on those areas that might be distracting us. There's one small one here. Let's see here, if we were to go and bring the exposure down on these guys ever so slightly, you can see there, once again, we don't want to overdo the image to the point that we completely lose what it represented. So in that case, if I just hold these, you can see how we've just softened those background areas ever so slightly. But now our leopard literally is the most brightest, the most contrasting part, as well as the sharpest. And in that case, we're winning with our image. So if I hold my before and after, for all of you, you can literally see what we started off with to what we have now. I love how we've got that push and pull factor. That's what I always try and remind myself when I'm taking an image, or rather editing an image. Focus on that push and pull factor. How are you pushing everything around your subject into your subject, and how are you pulling everything from the outside area back to your subject. So push and pull, push and pull. If we hold this before and after, see how we've got a push and pull effect. And that is literally it. There you have it, folks. So I hope you guys have taken 1 or 2 tips and tricks away from that image. And I hope that you can apply some of that to your own editing workflow. You know, one thing I would encourage you guys to do is have a look at all of the wild eye guides. See how we do things differently, because what I love about editing is at the end of the day, it's what you love to do. It's what you like to, or how you like your images looking. So by learning from myself, learning from Trevor, Mike, Johan, whoever it may be, you are able to take different styles from us and apply it to the way you like to edit. So nevertheless, folks, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you guys happen to see any of my other images that you would like me to show you how I edited them, please feel free to let me go, or let me know rather. And if you have any questions, also send them my way and I'll happily assist in any way possible. But nevertheless, thank you so much for all of your time. I appreciate it wherever you may be in the world. Go make some memories, happy snapping, and all the best, and see you soon. Cheers, everyone.